First, to welcome all of you attending today's public presentation. I promise that we will try to help you to discover route to sustainable agriculture by presenting and discussing beneficial effects of intercropping and also practical results from two aspects. First, legumes is ecological service in intercropping, to be presented by Dr. Djura Karagic. And the second one, legumes is the main crops in intercropping, to be presented by Dr. Nicolas Carton. Next, please. Let's first see what intercropping means. I choose one definition that says that intercropping represents simultaneous cultivation at least two crops in the same field, but also without necessarily sowing or harvesting them together. But I have a question for you. Do you have previous practical experience with intercropping?
And we will start a small poll for this so that you can answer this question. Lisa, can you start the poll?
Yeah, it's starting right now.
Okay.
Okay, can I continue?
Yes, please go ahead, Svetlana.
Yeah, I see that there are some experts here, and also some of you that are not dealing really with intercropping, but I'm really surprising that there are nobody that this system is completely new. But I will continue with general importance of intercropping. At first, this cropping system is in line with the Green Deal goals and objectives of Farm to Fork strategy. This is really very important for future of agriculture. Also, this cropping system contributes to diversification in farming. It means by introducing legumes, because we can say that legumes are pivotal in many intercropping systems. Further, ecological processes that underpin benefits arising from intercropping modify production to increase resilience related to varying environmental, climatic, and economical conditions. That is very important that such practice enables support of low input and resource limited agriculture system. How? In a way that increases income obtained by smallholder farmers, reducing their economic risk of growing single crop, and also helping them in better utilization of their land by cultivating more than one crop per their unit area. Next, please. That is some interesting importance of intercropping, because intercropping improves research by defining research challenges. For example, important one is breeding varieties for intercrops, and also strengthening interdisciplinary research. What that means? It means that such system gathering soil science, physiology, microbiologists, genetic, plant health, and other disciplines related to plant science. Next, please. This cultivation system ensures more food and environmental sustainability, because we can say that intercropping sets new design in agronomy and reduce environmental footprint on the final products for consumers, and also provides food security due to less impact on the environment. For example, improving soil fertility, water quality, disease and pest control, climate mitigation. Next, please. And final importance is that intercropping creates better understanding role and connection of biodiversity with improved nutrition and inclusion of functional food in human diet, and also strengthens social capital for green lifestyle. Next, please. We can conclude that intercropping fits in the vision, improving human health by improving environmental health. This is just a general introduction to direct your attention to the intercropping. I hope that I was successful in that, but for more details and results, I give the floor to my colleague Djura Karagic.
Thank you, Svetlana. Hello to everyone. Today's journey through beneficial effects of intercropping, I will start with a quite simple example. Next, please. Some of the most ingenious inventions in human history are very simple. Take this button for an example. The human desire for simplicity and effectiveness is deep and universal. However, nature is not in simplicity, but rather in complexity. This plant cell consists of many elements. Biophysics and biochemistry standing behind the miracle of life are exceptionally complex. Next, please. In our pursuit of simplicity and greater efficiency, we have ended up with industrial agriculture. This type of farming has delivered high yields of staple crops. Production is more efficient than ever. Despite its successes, industrial farming is a system that is clearly out of balance and one that has led to widespread problems for soil, air, climate, water, biodiversity, and public health. Simply, it is not sustainable. That is the whole problem. Next, please. What we need is an environmentally better way to achieve economically sound yields. We think that intercropping with legumes can be a right choice, but a modern version of an ancient agriculture technology is needed. Numerous research show that cereal-legume intercropping can produce 15 to 25% more total food when each crop is grown in monoculture. In conventional agriculture, nitrogen fertilizer application can be cut down significantly, up to 36%. And for organic agriculture, it can be used as a single source of nitrogen. Cereal grain quality can be maintained on a satisfactory level, and altogether, that will increase profitability and yield stability, while ecological footprint would be minimized. Next, please. All these questions are practically goals of our company, Login Eco. On our 3,700 hectares of organic fields, we develop a model of sustainable organic farming. One of our main goals is to develop a modern, efficient version of intercropping. What we are trying is to adapt this ancient system used mainly by smallholder farmers to a large-scale, data-driven precision agriculture. Our goal is to remove organic production from being dependent on livestock farming. You know, in Eastern Europe, there are more hectares of land than animals that can provide enough manure for maintaining soil organic matter. And of course, our ultimate goal is knowledge sharing with both organic and conventional farmers. Here on this slide, you can see some of our findings on wheat alfalfa and wheat forage pea intercropping. The trial was established at our farm in Serbia. Over here, we have temperate, semi-arid climate and long-term national average yield for soft winter wheat is 5.1 ton per hectare. In our trial, monocrop wheat yielded 3.98 tons per hectare, and wheat yield in intercropping with alfalfa was 4.41, and with spring forage pea, 5.4 ton per hectare. Protein content in wheat grains was positively influenced by intercropping. So intercropping of legume with cereal increases yield by reducing feed pressure and diseases. By complementarity in resource using, you will hear more about that from Nicolas, but most likely due to below ground nutrient transfer. Next, please. Be not afraid, I'm not going to elaborate on these schemes. I just wanted to show you complexity of interspecific relationship in our intercropping ecosystems. What is the most important? Legumes are able to add new value to the plant soil system. They are able to provide a fair amount of nitrogen through a well-known process of biological nitrogen fixation. Some of fixed nitrogen, some of that is shared to non-legume plants. And not only do they profit from nitrogen, but phosphorus uptake in the intercropping system is also enhanced. Next, please. So some of fixed nitrogen is shared to non-legume plants as a portion of the nitrogen supply of cereals and is considered as an auxiliary source of nitrogen for the main crop. The quantities of that nitrogen transfer are variable depending on many factors, on the season, species, variety of legume and non-legume plants. So amount of shared nitrogen, according to previous studies, is between 5 and 15% of total nitrogen demand of cereal plant. Our legume plant from this year intercropping can be the main source of nitrogen for the succeeding crop. And exactly that is what we are doing at Login Eco, developing a model to exploit excellent drought tolerance of deep-rooted perennial multi-harvest crops such as alfalfa that is able to come up with lush biomass, rich in nitrogen, to provide as much nitrogen as needed for our next nitrogen-demanding crop such as corn or sunflower or cabbage. By this means, we can provide 140 up to 200 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. Next, please. Apart from providing nitrogen in agricultural system, intercropping provides a diversification of our cropping systems. It is going to enrich both above and below ground biodiversity. Crop species diversity is increased, fauna richness is increased, especially for arthropod, pollinators, predatory insects, then spiders, birds, other animals. That is why diversification enhances pollination, pest control, nutrient cycling, soil fertility, and water regulation without compromising crop yields. As a result, we have win-win situation, support of services, and good crop yields. Next, please. Reducing use of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers is one of the potential ways to reverse land degradation and ultimately increase the productivity of degrading soils. Especially important service of intercropping is the increase of soil organic matter. Rate of losing soil organic matter in Eastern Europe is worrying. For example, here in Serbia, we lose 0.5% of humus at each 20 years. And 20 years for soil formation is an eye blink, so we have to act fast. Adding more organic matter will enhance soil quality, especially soil structure, and all of these services together will result in a lower soil tillage cost. Next, please. To conclude, so at the end of my presentation, here are some take-home notes. So intercropping systems represent environmentally superior, better way to achieve economically sound yields. Log-in eco intercropping model is applicable for both small and large-scale farmers. Using intercropping, we can achieve higher yields, better quality, while using a lower nitrogen fertilizer. By intercropping, we can improve biodiversity, soil quality, reduce water pollution, greenhouse gas emission, and overall negative impact of agriculture on climate change. That's all from my side. Nicolas Carton will show you other benefits and possibilities of intercropping. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Djura. Thank you for your nice presentation. I'm going to continue showing you cases where intercropping is seen as a way to facilitate the cultivation of legumes for food. So legumes for food, it means pulses. You talk about lentils, beans, peas, lupins, in some cases, chickpeas that you can use in your kitchen. I'm going to show you a few examples from my time as in the academic research in France and in Sweden, and some practical experiences that I gathered in South Germany. Next, please. First, a question for you. Now we are talking about intercrops where both crops are sown at the same time and harvested at the same time, and you may want to sort the products of the harvest if you harvest together. So how many combinations, which combinations do you think can be used in that way from the list that will now appear in the poll, Romain? Please choose the ones that you think can be used by farmers. There can be several right answers, of course. Lisa, do you think most people have had the time to answer the poll now?
I see it's still I still see more answers coming in. We have about 70% of participation rates. I will give it one more second.
We are very happy about wrong answers as well, of course, because it's a way to discuss then. No stress.
Okay, 71%. I'm sharing the results now.
Okay, so I'm happy to see that the two options that I consider good ideas for the farmers are the ones with the most votes. lentil and oat is an intercrop that can be practiced, and winter pea and rye can be practiced. There are two cases where the crops can be sown at the same time and they work well together. In the case of lentil and maize, the sowing dates don't really fit well together, and then the maize would be very competitive on the lentil because lentil is a very short plant. So I'm not sure it would work. Winter pea and sunflower, it's more a problem of not sowing the plants at the same time. Of course, you could try to sow sunflower into the winter pea, but it's really difficult since peas stretch themselves and have these tendrils. Spring pea and buckwheat, I think the pea would make the buckwheat lodge, and also the time of sowing it doesn't really fit together. Faba bean plus hemp, I'm not sure if anyone has tried this one yet, but I think the hemp is very competitive and I don't see really big benefit of this intercrop. So yeah, some good ideas in here. I'm going to continue and show you some of the examples that I've been studying in the fields. And the idea, can you, next slide, please? Yes, to show you the motivations and the difficulties that the farmers face when they choose intercropping. Why do they choose it and what is difficult? And I will illustrate this by examples from the practice. So one of the first benefits for a farmer to choose intercropping, one of his first reasons, is to reduce inputs. In this example, it's winter lupin and triticale that I was studying in Western France. On the picture on the left, you can see winter lupin. We have removed the weeds per hand. So you see lots of bare ground, and on the picture on the right, it's combined with triticale, and you see lupin is in the rows exactly in the same way as on the left, but you have triticale in between. And here, of course, there is much less space for the weeds to develop. They can have less light and less nutrients from the ground. So then the farmer can reduce or stop using herbicides on this crop. And maybe it will also spare fuel. In organic farming, you know that we control the weeds with the mechanical weeding techniques, with the tractor in the field. So it also uses fuel, and if you can reduce this, you reduce the use of fuel. Next slide, please. Just wanted to show you some other pictures of this beautiful intercrop, the lupin and the cereals. On the left, at the beginning of lupin flowering, in the middle when the triticale is flowering, and in the right when both crops are ready to harvest. Next, please. Of course, I wanted to outline the difficulties. So one of the difficulties for intercropping are it is difficult to find compatible varieties or species, as the poll question pointed out. We have to find varieties that combine well together. Maybe all the cereals don't work well with this variety of winter lupin because they mature too fast or too slowly, for instance. And there are less technical references and advice than for the sole crops. So the farmers need to make their own trials. That's what some of the innovative farmers are doing. And the technical institutes and researchers are also working on this question. Next, please. Another example to illustrate another reason for a farmer to choose intercrops. As Djura mentioned, intercrops produce a high level of biomass, which can have long-term benefits for the soil fertility and for the biodiversity. This was very clear in this case of intercrop in the south of Germany, and it's also grown in Sweden. It is a winter pea and a rye crop. On the picture on the left, you see the crop, it was in May, I think. It was more than 2 meters high, the nice pea flowering between the rye stalks, as you see on the picture on the right. And the farmers was really happy to have so much biomass feeding the soil after the harvest. Next slide, please. But intercropping doesn't solve all the problems that we have with these crops. We talked before about a lot of enemies of legume crops. This is one that is really problematic. This is the pea weevil. You see the little bug on the right. And in this case, the farmers was not able to commercialize the crops because the peas were full of these larvae, as you see on the picture on the right. I tried to cook some of them. After discarding the ones that were floating, there were still larvae in the peas. So this was not a case This was a case where the farmer had to use it as feed and could not sell it as food. There is a solution against this bug, but it's very costly. You need to put the harvest very quickly after the harvest. You put the grains in a controlled atmosphere or you freeze it, and then you can get rid of the bugs. Next, please. Another benefit of intercropping is to increase the total yield and to increase the yield stability. I come back to the example of lupin and triticale. On the left, some data from trials in Western France. You see on the left of the graph, the yield of the sole crop lupin, about 3 tons per hectare. And on the right, the yield of the intercrop. And you see that if you sum up cereal and lupin, you have gained more than 30% of yield. And of course, next, please. This allows to use diversity to not put your eggs in one basket. You get some kind of compensation in case of crop failure, because these results are from a network of fields. So it's an average between 11 situations, and you had some situations where the sole crop lupin didn't grow well at all, and then at least the farmer had some triticale or some other cereal to harvest. But you also see that the yield of the lupin in the intercrop is on average less than in the sole crop. So of course the cereal does some competition on the legume, and then you harvest in average less of the legume in that specific case of the intercrop. Next, please. Another example here in Sweden with spring pea and oats. On the picture, I don't know if you can see the pea plants, but we see mostly oats. This was a case of a very dry spring in southern Sweden, and then the peas didn't develop well, and the farmer was hoping the pea to be the main crop he would harvest from this, and instead he got a lot of oats. So the proportions cannot really be foreseen. You need to know that you might get lots of one of the other components. So the farmers and the downstream actors need to be very flexible when commercializing the crops. But actually, this is not very specific to intercropping, because if he would have sown them separately, he would have had the same problem of good harvest of oats and bad harvest of peas. Next, please. One of the main benefits for some crops like lentil is to improve the standing ability. What do I mean with standing ability? If you look at this lentil field in Sweden, so lentil alone, it was building some kind of mat lying on the ground. It was about 8 centimeters high, although on the picture on the right, you see that the plants were actually 40 centimeters high. They were completely dropped on laying on the ground. Next, please. When you add a cereal in the system, like on these two pictures, of course, the lentils are able to climb, to attach to the stalks of the cereal, and then they stand until the harvest. And this allows the farmers to harvest their lentils with a better quality, because they don't harvest stones on the ground. They don't need to put the machine to harvest very deep next to the ground, and they also lose less lentils, because when you harvest in a mat like in the previous pictures, you lose up to half of the lentils that actually were on the plants, because the machine is not able to pick them up. So that's a huge improvement in the case of lentil, for example. Next, please. And just for you who may ask yourself, how do you harvest that kind of mixes? The answer is very easy, the same way than if you would have lentils or cereals separately. Just need to adjust a little bit the parameters of the combine harvester, but it works, and farmers harvest the two crop components in one go. Next, please.
I think the next slide is the video. I just wanted to warn everyone that it's a bit loud, so especially if you're using headphones, you might want to have your finger on the volume button.
So maybe as you don't know what's happening on this video, it's the same crop that we've seen before, the crop that was 2 meters high with the very nice pea flowers blooming in the rye stalks, it actually did lodge, so it fell down before harvest because of a storm, and the very high crop was lying on the ground, just like the lentil I showed you. But in that case, the farmer managed to harvest it thanks to the rye, because if it would have been pea alone, it wouldn't have stand high enough for the harvester to harvest it. It would have been more or less stuck to the ground with some peas already getting some mold down there with the humidity. So even if the crop doesn't stand up until harvest, the cereal in this case is ensuring that the crop can be harvested in the end. Please, next slide. Hey, this is the video again. Okay. Then, of course, if you harvest both crops at the same time, what you get out of the combine harvester is what you see on the picture on the top right, a mixture of, in this case, peas and rye. That was on my hand on the picture. So it takes a lot of time or a lot of investment to sort these crops. On the left, you can see lentils that were intercropped with oats that I was sorting per hand. It's a huge work. So of course, on big areas, nobody does that per hand. You need machines, like on the picture in the middle. So there are some farmer groups who invest together to get the machines, because it does, in most cases, it does not make sense for each farmer to have the machines that they use a few times in the year. Or sometimes the farmers manage to find buyers who are ready to purchase the mixtures, especially if it's for feed. But for food, most of the time we separate the two crops. And of course, some mixtures cannot be sorted as easily, like this lentil and oats. It's way easier if you have a big difference in seed size, then you can just use sieves, like if you have faba beans with wheat, for instance. So you can also have some restrictions in which crop you can grow together. Next, please. Another advantage of intercropping is that the cereals you get have a high protein content. On the left, you see a picture where we studied the roots of these crops growing together, because lots of things, as Djura mentioned, happen under the ground. I'm going to explain you very easily why the cereals have a higher nitrogen content than if you grow the cereal alone. With this graph on the right, you see lots of wheat plants, for instance, are sharing the soil nitrogen pool. Each of the plants want their share of this nitrogen. And now in intercropping, the situation is a bit different, because you use a very little density of the cereal plants, which is enough to provide the benefits that we were talking about. So each of the cereal plants have access to more of the nitrogen. Also because the legume plant is fixating most of its nitrogen, so they don't need so much from the soil nitrogen, and then each cereal plant can produce grains with a higher protein content. Next, please. As a conclusion, intercropping is used as a way to grow grain legumes that are not so easy to grow alone, especially in organic farming. When you add cereals to the pea or lentil field or maize in the climbing beans, they will at the same time steal the resources away from the weeds. They will use these resources to produce some bonus food if you want, and they will also provide some standing support for the crops. Next, please. Of course, this is not easy for all farmers to apply, because it involves going out of the comfort zone, taking some risks. So that's why it's really interesting to work in groups, and lots of farmers are working in groups to explore this kind of alternative way to farm. And I was happy to participate in a work in Sweden where, as researchers, we designed together with a group of farmers some experiments that the farmers were having on their own farms, and lots of these farmers were really happy to have this collaboration, and it helped the group setting helped them to have the feeling of being on the right track, improving their system. Next, please. As a conclusion and opening for the discussion, let's have a look at our plates. Most of you probably know that in lots of civilizations around the world, legumes are eaten together with cereals, because it provides a good combination of amino acids for the protein intake, especially if you eat little or no animal products. So couscous with chickpeas, rice and beans in Africa, maize and beans in the Americas, lentils and spätzle, which is a kind of pasta in Germany, hummus and pita, for instance, in the Middle East, the minestrone soup in Italy, etc., etc. You have a lot of them everywhere. Now the question is, of course, in these cases, most of the time the crops haven't been grown together. And even if they would have been grown together, they first need to be separated to then be put back together again on the plates. Now the question is, could we help the farmers and avoid this step of sorting the harvest if we could buy mixed intercrop products? So one question for you, another poll question now. Would you buy mixed whole lentils and wheat if you were told that it is the product of an intercrop, and if we would give you the recipe for intercrop burger patties, for instance?
Okay, I see here almost 90% of participation.
Let's see if the picture of the patties is making you hungry or not. Okay, so most people would like to help the farmers by buying directly the mixtures. That's nice. I think that it also means that we managed to convince you, if it was not already the case, of all the benefits of intercrops. And now I would like to open for discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you, Djura. Thank you, Svetlana. This was a packed 40 minutes of information. And okay, where are the questions for this? Maybe I can start with one statement. I think as a gardener, you have a hard time avoiding intercropping, actually. And most of us have some experience with this. Gardening, my wife is just trying a new strategy with straw to avoid too much taking out the weed, too much weeding, right? And it is more labor intensive. In general, we've seen some interesting machinery here, but in general, would you say intercropping is more labor intensive? Is that something that may also prevent farmers from trying?
I can try to answer this question. I think in this kind of field crops where everything is done with machines anyway, because you are talking about sowing several hectares at the same time of this crop, it does add some work. Of course, you need to mix the seeds, for instance. You need to think. I think it's mostly the thinking and the knowledge that is lacking, but it takes a little bit more time. At the same time, you can also reduce weeding as we have shown. And I think the farmers who actually adopt intercropping are seeing more benefits in terms of time and labor, especially when they have a partner who is taking over the step of sorting the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And for the manual part, let's say, I think like if we look at the market gardening movement, which is growing all over the world, they work a lot with intercropping because they're doing manual weeding anyway. And then if you throw on a lot of compost, then sometimes weeds don't even have the chance to come through. So, and then intercropping is, apart from the nutrient management status, is also a very space effective way of growing stuff. Like I do this with vegetables, and apart from really having fun with it, like combining soybeans and carrots, for example, or the classical mulpa, it's also, yeah, you spend less money, because if you're doing something manual anyway, then if you need like 1/4 of a hectare to make a living, that's really beneficial. But then, you know, you don't need an adapted machine or something. You just have great tools.
Okay, Anne, you had a question?
I just want to transmit a question in the chat. Elizabeth Bellinghoff, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, is asking, how do we think this could be communicated to the consumer, and do we need another label, or would that be too much information?
I can try to answer this one as well. I know some farmers who have managed to give the information to their consumers, either directly because they sell lentils, for instance, in small packages directly on their farm shops, and then they can put some information. Often on the package, it's written the name of the variety, and they can also say it would be grown in our field with this kind of soil type, with this kind of cereal together. And there are also examples of cooperatives who are doing it with more farmers. It doesn't have to take a lot of space, and it's not too difficult for the consumers to understand. I think if you just mention it in one sentence on the package, and maybe it will make people curious if they haven't heard about intercropping before, and if they know, then they are happy because they feel that they are eating the right thing, I think.
Thank you. There is another question to Nicola from Olga. Do you think it is worth for combined harvester manufacturers to invest into the research on intercropping, or is it more about make more experiments in the field and the technique of harvesting is good enough so far? It's probably not just a question to Nicola, but especially also to Djura. We've seen big machinery over the fields in Serbia as well.
Yes, I can try to answer this. In my opinion, what is needed is a good cooperation between smallholder farmers to have a nice plant seed cleaning facility, and that is going to solve this type of problems. In Serbia, we are trying to spread idea of organic farming and to improve ecological point of this question. And in our thinking, the fastest way of increasing area in organic farming is to use field crops to produce grains. So because you know, for vegetable production you need few hectares, 3 hectares is enough, but for wheat production or oats production you need several hundred hectares. So your impact is going to be quite different. And that is why, for example, here we are trying to provide service to smallholder farmers and to help them to clean their products, to store their products, and to market their products. Nicola.
Can give a quick comment also on this topic to Olga's questions. I think the harvesting is not the main problem. It's more the sorting, like Djura mentioned, but also the seeding. If you want to sow the intercrops with different seed sizes, for instance, sometimes you cannot just mix them and sow them at the same time in the machine. So, but there are already machines on the market that do this really well, also for big areas. It's more the problem of the farmers' capacity to invest, because it's a lot of money to buy these kind of machines. So we also need some kind of low-tech solutions, and I know farmers who develop their own adaptations for the sowing machines, for instance.
Thank you. Fiona is next,
Yeah,
and those of you who want to ask a question, ideally you use this this little hand Fiona is just raising by clicking on it. Then I can see you want to speak immediately. But I have the next guy who just wrote to me on the list already. Excuse me, Fiona, your turn.
No problem, Betty. It's not so much a question, more just a comment on what was being spoken about a moment ago about how to get these mixtures to the consumer. And I think, yes, providing information on how the mixture came about is important. But I think what's maybe even more important is to come up with and provide information on what people can do with the mixture so that they make something they want to eat. Because as a consumer, if I can do something with the mixture that gives me something I want to eat, then that is the biggest drive, I think, to buy it. And Nicolas, please forgive me if I say I would maybe come up with pictures that are a little bit different to the burgers you showed us. For me, they didn't look too appetizing, sorry.
You have to see them live.
You have to,
no,
I
agree.
Them, I would say, yes.
You have to smell it.
Yeah. But I think maybe putting a little bit of time and contacting, I don't know, a couple of chefs or cooks or whatever to come up with nice recipes would probably be a good way to get people motivated to buying something like that.
Cool.
Yes, totally.
Carl Philipp, for your non-scientific questions, please.
Otherwise, there are questions from a question from Carla Lakunabi. Yes.
Let's see. Carl Philipp, can you hear us? Your turn. We don't hear you. Probably you have a problem with the. Yeah, no, it's you're turned on and still we can't hear you. You probably want to experiment with the microphone on the bottom left. There is a little sign and maybe you have the wrong one. Anne, would you give us the next question meanwhile?
Yes, so Carla was asking if this topic would be important to be visible and known at the Grüne Woche and at the GFFA in Berlin. What you think about it?
Hello.
Yeah, on the Grüne Woche, I mean, as soon as such a thing exists again, we didn't have one for the past 2 years. It should be there, obviously, even though it is not general practice as exhibited yet. But I think in the innovation hall of the Grüne Woche in Berlin, we might find an intercropping booth next year.
Okay, thank you. And maybe call Philip.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, finally. Sorry, during the... Oh my, this is my smartphone, sorry. Okay, I activated the Google search on my smartphone, sorry. During the pandemic, I never had a Zoom meeting, so sorry. This is my very first time, but I'm glad to see you all. And it was very interesting to hear your comment, Mr. Herlin, as a gardener. I just wonder, I guess you are not a gardener from your work, but this is your hobby. Am I right?
Yes, you are, but still it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know, because we share the same hobby, and I guess all of you have at least some spaces where you grow something. I just wanted to say, because I'm coming originally from a media designer background, I grown up in marketing and advertising agencies in Cologne, and I'm very skeptic from my first years as a child. I guess I'm not anymore working in this type of work, but since my childhood, my early childhood, I always was feeling so grateful for the nature and everything that exists within. So I started to study biology, but I quit. Now, since around about 2.5 years, I've been working in several companies within the plant production. First, we grow roses and trees and stuff like that. And now since
Carl Philipp, what would be your question?
My question, special to Mr. Karagic, is you're talking about biodiversity, but I don't feel it. I don't know what you really mean about biodiversity, because when I look at in the surroundings, in the landscape, and I see farming, which is a great part of Southwest Germany and Germany especially, but here in the South, I see monocultural acres, mostly crops, maize, grain, and a lot of other stuff. What means biodiversity for you? Because I can't see the growth of extinct or almost extinct insects. I can't see the growth of spaces where biodiversity can happen. Are you only concerned with the soil, or is it
okay more? Thank you.
I think it is more than just soil. Soil is quite important, but it is more. Unfortunately, yeah, you are right. You can see monocrops all over Europe because, as I said, it is more effective. It is more effective. However, it is not sustainable. Why? You saw what ecological damage it can drive. So it is a combination of increasing people conscious about ecological issues, as well as government support to encourage producers to go out of comfort zone, as Nicolas put it. So it is more work intensive system of farming, and you need to be better at planning, at organization. You have to cooperate with other farmers to provide specific equipment for sowing, for weed control, for sorting mixed yield of mixed grains. So there is a long road in front of us in our attempt to increase biodiversity. And can you imagine what violence against nature is when you have huge massive of one crop? That one crop cannot provide any service to living species, and that is problem why we have problems with pollinators, etc. So, but in my opinion, things are changing, slow, but they are changing.
Thank you very much. I think that was a perfect final word. I've learned that it is not so much additional work, but additional thinking and additional acceptance of the high complexity and diversity of the nature we work with. It is something about overcoming convenience. Just as in the consumer edge of the game, I think it is also for farmers the main challenge is to overcome convenience, the simple way, as you showed with the bottom first. And I believe that it is necessary to take one step after the other in order to re-establish ourselves in this network of complexity. Thank you so much for the introduction to this convenience. And as we are sharply at 6 o'clock, maybe we can have the last slide here. Okay. Oh, what a pity. It's the old one. The next meeting will be on Thursday, 19th of May at 5 o'clock again. And we will talk about legumes and global food security. We will have an update on the legume production situation in the Ukraine, especially soybeans. We will talk about proteins as a source and immediate relief in hunger relief actions that we can expect to play an important role this year, unfortunately. We will talk about EU programs to increase plant protein production as a reaction to the present agricultural consequences of the war. And we will also hear about the role of legumes in small farmer strategies to avoid severe hunger situations. There will be a presentation from Kenya, and we would hope that we would probably also get one from India. So we will try to address the question of what can legumes contribute to the worsening food security situation in the world. And please register, please spread the word about it. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much to our presenters. And thank you so much to Lisa and Romain and Anne and Franca for helping to organize this. And it's been a pleasure as always. And I wish you a nice evening. Bye-bye.